Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask-strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1077 for October 6th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
I believe whiskey and spirits in general are facilitators for conversation. I believe that they're present at moments in our lives that often mean something significant. And I was amazed and impressed that, like, when people are experiencing those things, I am there in spirit because they're drinking something that I created.
Wes Henderson's retirement didn't last very long. A little more than a year after he left Angel's Envy, he has jumped into the middle of three interconnected projects: a new distillery in Versailles, Kentucky, running the Kentucky Castle event space and boutique hotel nearby, and a new whiskey brand called True Story. We'll get the true story behind all three on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella from Jewers here. The 2024 U.S. Open Championship may have ended, but you can still get your hands on the whiskey created to honor it. The new Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition. Trust me, a whiskey you don't want to miss. More details coming up.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Dock workers at ports along the U.S. East Coast walked off the job Tuesday, snarling shipping traffic up and down the coast. The strike lasted 3 days before a tentative agreement was reached with the help of the White House. It'll take a couple of weeks to clear the backlog of containers that need to be unloaded from ships, but the threat of a long-term strike that could have affected whiskey shipments from Scotland and Ireland is over for now. The International Wine and Spirits Competition has handed out its trophy winners for 2024. Kentucky Peerless's High Rye Bourbon was awarded the trophy for Best Bourbon, while Five Trail Barrel Proof Batch 3 from Coors Spirit Company was named the Best Worldwide Whiskey. Tomatin's Legacy Single Malt won the trophy for Best No-Age Statement Single Malt Scotch. East Asia Whiskey Company's 35-year-old Bunnahabhain, Cask 88 Imperial Distillery the Bothy 25-year-old Scotch, and Inchmurrin 12-year-old won trophies for single malts, while Johnny Walker's High Rye Blended Scotch won the trophy for Best Blended Scotch. Power's Three Swallow won the trophy for Best Irish Whiskey, and Frank August Case Study Winter Cover Rye won the trophy for Best Rye Whiskey. We have a link to the complete list of trophy winners in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. Suntory has introduced its oldest blended Japanese whiskey yet. The Hibiki 40-year-old comes from whiskeys aged in Spanish, American, and Mizunara oak. It's priced at $35,000 a bottle. The Macallan has unveiled the oldest whiskey on record as part of a 2-bottle collection. The Time Space collection features an 84-year-old single malt distilled in 1940 from 2 casks, a first-fill American oak butt, and a second-fill European oak butt. It's bottled at 43.6% ABV. And it's paired with what may be the youngest Macallan release on record, a 5-year-old malt that's the first to be bottled from the Macallan's new distillery in Speyside. The 2-bottle set is priced at a whopping $190,000. The Dalmore is introducing its Cask Curation series with a 3-bottle set of whiskeys ranging from 27 to 43 years old, all finished in tawny port casks from Graham's. The price tag, £35,000 for the 3-bottle set. Diageo has released its Blade and Bow 22-year-old bourbon at the Stitzel-Weller Distillery in Louisville. The annual limited release is aged and bottled at Stitzel-Weller and will be available in a handful of select U.S. markets while supplies last. There's no word on pricing. Brown-Forman has released this year's edition of King of Kentucky bourbon. The single-barrel offering is 16 years old and will be available in Kentucky and 10 other states with a recommended retail price of $349.99 a bottle. I received a sample of this one, and I'll have my tasting notes for it later on. Portland's Westward Whiskey is celebrating its 20th anniversary with the release of Milestone. It's the second annual release for the Solera-aged whiskey. It's priced at $250 a bottle. I'll have tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. The Whiskey Exchange has just released the second entry in its Seasons collection. The autumn whiskeys include a 9-year-old Kalila, a 12-year-old Dalyuan, and a 17-year-old Lechig. All three are bottled at cask strength with prices ranging from £74.95 for the Kalila to £240 for the Lechig. Denmark's Stauning Distillery has released a U.S. exclusive bottling. The Stauning Rye sherry cask finish uses a combination of PX and Palo Cortado sherry casks. Only 800 bottles are available at $74.99 each through Stauning's website. Widow Jane has released its oldest whiskey yet, the 20-year-old Black Opal. The blend was finished in Japanese Mizunara oak casks and will sell for $500 a bottle. Johnny Walker has released this year's limited release of Johnny Walker Blue Label. Blue Label Ice Chalet celebrates the essence of winter. Master blender Emma Walker selected whiskeys from Brora and Dalwhinnie to lead the blend, which is priced at £325 a bottle in the UK. There's no word on U.S. pricing. The Balvenie is bringing back its 12-year-old single-barrel whiskey. Stock limitations forced the distillery to stop producing it 2 years ago, but they've found enough stock to bottle an exclusive run of the 12-year-old single malt. It's priced at $79.99 a bottle. Suntory Global Spirits has unveiled a new 11-year-old cask-strength Old Overholt rye. The unfiltered rye was distilled in the fall of 2012 and is bottled at 53.7% ABV. It's priced at $99.99 a bottle. We don't hear much very often from Hudson Whiskey, but the William Grant & Sons-owned distillery is releasing a new Calvados cask-finished rye whiskey created by master blender Brian Kinsman. It carries a recommended retail price of $69.99 a bottle. And finally, Uncle Nearest has released what it's calling an approachable whiskey. Nearest Green Tennessee Whiskey is bottled at 42% ABV and will be priced at $29.99 a bottle. They're kicking it off with a bar challenge starting in Tennessee, pitting the new whiskey blind against the host bar's usual well-brand bourbon. The only caveat, Jack Daniel's will not be included in the taste tests. As the brand puts it, Nearest Green and Jack Daniel never competed against each other when they were alive, and their whiskeys won't compete against each other today. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's going on around the world of whiskey. The Brandy Library in New York City has an exceptional Scotch Spirit School class on Tuesday night. Bourbon's Bistro in Louisville hosts a Filmland Spirits whiskey dinner on Thursday. Whiskeys of the World Atlanta is on Saturday night the 12th. The Manchester Whiskey Festival is October 18th and 19th in Manchester, England. Sagamore Spirit Distillery hosts its final Whiskey on the Waterfront party for the season on the 19th. And the San Diego Spirits Festival is on the 19th and 20th in La Jolla, California. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Every year, Dewar's, the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open Championship, rolls out a special limited edition whiskey to celebrate that year's tournament. The 2024 championship wrapped up in June, but the 2024 Dewar's 19-year Pinehurst edition is available now, and you don't want to miss it. This year's 19-year whiskey is double-aged, then extra-matured in rye casks, offering a rich profile with notes of pear and heather honey. There's a hint of spice in there, too, along with a dusting of cinnamon and cocoa powder. It's a sensory delight for any true whiskey or golf fan. So trust me, my fellow aficionados, grab a bottle and enjoy a whiskey crafted with the same skill and precision that makes the U.S. Open legendary. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume. Imported by John Dewar & Sons, Coral Gables, Florida.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. Wes Henderson retired from Angel's Envy almost 2 years ago, but retirement just didn't suit him. Now he's back in the business with plans to build a new $92 million distillery in Versailles, Kentucky, along with upgrades to the Kentucky Castle Boutique Hotel and event space that he bought last year. Oh, and he's launching a new whiskey brand, too. I spent some time with Wes on a Zoom call this week. You didn't take your retirement too well, did you?
Well, I tried. I gave it the good fight, and it lasted about a year, and I couldn't do it anymore, unfortunately.
So you've decided to build a distillery on top of renovating the Kentucky Castle, on top of starting a new whiskey brand. Which one is the priority?
I'm juggling right now. They're all priorities. They're all concurrent projects. The Kentucky Castle, for example, is really not a renovation. It's it's making it a little more bourbon centric. It's doing some improvements for efficiencies, and it's still a huge event space and boutique hotel and spa. We'll continue to operate it like that, but like I said, we'll make it a little more bourbon centric, and then we'll have it capable of hosting folks who come and visit our new distillery, which is right up the street. So that project is underway. That's about 4 minutes up the road in Versailles. We have another 150 acres there, and we're going to build a new distillery, and then we got a little brand we're getting ready to launch. So all those things. So priority wise, it's all happening at once, Mark.
Let's talk about the distillery first. Why build a distillery now when there's talk that we may be starting to get into a whiskey lake?
I think that's a really good question. I want to be able to control our own destiny. I want to be able to make our own liquid. I think we even though we've got some fantastic liquid, in the past, and we currently have some fantastic liquid from amazing producers, I still would rather be able to produce it myself. So that's really the big thing. We may do a little contract production for friends, small brands and friends in the industry, but that's not really part of our model. It's really just for us. But you're right. I mean, there's definitely I think we're already seeing it. We're seeing a little contraction in the marketplace, which is good, by the way, I believe. And we're seeing a lot of whiskey out there, but this is for us. So that's why it's important.
Why do you see it as good?
Well, I think that it's the shelves are too full. And I've been saying this for a while, that I really believe there's going to be a correction. You're going to see some smaller brands that don't have enough distribution or have trouble getting into distribution, selling enough volume to make it. And, I think it's just inevitable when you have that many products on the shelf and you're spreading out the sales amongst a bunch of different brands, as opposed to concentrating them in some brands that I think are some of the best brands out there. So that's where I believe that we're headed.
That brings to mind a question: why launch a new brand if you think there are already too many brands on the shelves?
Another fantastic question. You're on mark today. We asked ourselves this question, and the question we asked ourselves specifically was, does the world need another bourbon brand? And the answer we came up with is really no. But what the world will appreciate and will gravitate towards are quality brands with quality people behind it, with good reputations of making great liquid, of being innovative, great packaging, all those things combined. I think those are the types of brands that that the market continues to need and want. But we asked ourselves that, and that's the exact answer we came up with. That world doesn't necessarily need another bourbon brand, but we're gonna do it in a way that we think people are going to appreciate it.
Let's talk about True Story. The two whiskeys that you're starting out with are a finished bourbon and a finished rye. Let's talk about the bourbon first.
Okay. Well, as you can imagine, we are still in the finishing sandbox. I think that it's safe to say we kind of created that sandbox, and we're very comfortable there, but we're not going to be confined there like we did at Angel's Envy. We kind of made a conscious decision not to do anything that wasn't finished, but we're not doing that now. we're going to work on the art of blending and still continue to do finishing, but the bourbon is finished in white muscatel barrels. I love the barrels we got. I love the way that the muscatel really softens the bourbon and adds some nice floral notes to it, and some of those white grape flavors as well. It's a very complex, very layered bourbon, and it's still much like Angel's Envy. Even though the taste profiles are very different, it is very approachable, very drinkable to people no matter where they are on their bourbon journey. I'm really excited about it. I think it's one of the best things we've done.
And the rye is finished in a combination of Amburana and sherry casks. I have to admit, I tasted them both, and I like the rye better than I do the bourbon.
And that's okay. The Amburana casks I think are another really incredible interpretation of how the rye should work. It's a little heavier handed on the finish, like I've done in the past with my previous ryes. So even though the taste profile is very different, the finish is definitely right there. So the Amburana and then the sherry barrels are very complementary, and it's okay to like one over the other. I don't have some people taste the bourbon and like the bourbon more, which is what I've experienced with other things I've worked on. We just try to create the most expressive, fun thing that we can, and kind of hope that people fall in line with whatever they like.
I'm not saying the bourbon is bad. I'm saying it's good. I just liked the rye better.
Oh, that's okay, and I agree. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I fall maybe a little more partial to the rye. They're all my babies, so I don't really discriminate against them. But the rye is more my style of the way I like finished whiskeys. And the bourbon is more the boys. The boys were very involved in this, in the blending and creating of the taste profile. So, they're more like Dad, Mark. My dad was about subtlety. I've been more about being more upfront with the flavors, and finishing. And the boys are more like my father. The boys, it kind of comes full circle to where they are more on the subtlety side. So you see probably more of the boys in the bourbon. You see probably more of me in the rye.
Interesting analogy. What did you learn at Angel's Envy that you're going to take with you to the new distillery?
What did I learn at Angel's Envy? We learned how to create a global bourbon brand, global whiskey brand, and all the things that go along with that. You take all those lessons, and it's not just in creation of the liquid. It's how you market the product. It's on the sales side. It's on all the other business operations, the production side. So it's impossible to list all the lessons that we learned from Angel's Envy, and carried over with us. And we were very fortunate. Angel's Envy was a project that just went well. I don't think we had a lot of missteps with Angel's Envy. Not to say there weren't things we wouldn't do differently, but things just kind of fell in line. And I'm hoping, and I'm seeing so far that the same things are happening here. We're just continuing to do what we know how to do and not try to get too cute with it. Stick with what we know and continue to innovate and continue to share the story with the world. And, as we talk about true story, that's really what inspired that.
What's the best lesson you learned from your dad?
Dad I think I learned from my father how to have a presence. Dad pushed me out to do what I needed to do, or he let me do the things that I needed to do to learn when I started Angel's Envy. But he was still there in the background, being very reassuring, being validating, helping, course correct if we felt like we needed to do that. And that's really what I'm doing with the boys. The boys got thrown into the deep end of the pool very early in this business. And, none of them were 21 when we started it, and they're all now 21 or older. So they've seen how the business has grown, and they've learned so much. So I think the same tactics with my boys is throw them in, obviously not without a life jacket, but let them learn, let them make mistakes, let them do what they need to do. And now they know so much, Mark. It's really unbelievable. It really is. They could run most of this operation themselves.
You going to let them?
No, not right now. If no, but I look, there's a lot of latitude there, especially on the operations side. And I'm going to get out and do what I'm good at. And that's sharing the bourbon gospel and talking about true story and working with our bartender friends and our retail partners and our consumers. And that's what I enjoy doing more than anything. And, then they can mind the store while I'm out and about.
Where did the name True Story come from?
When I first started thinking about names and bottle designs and everything like that, I was astounded by the similarities in all the bourbon packaging. I really was. It was, I looked down one of the aisles. I think it was at Liquor Barn or someplace like that, and for inspiration, I'm like, wow, everything looks the same. So, and we can talk about the bottle itself, but the name comes from just what I said a minute ago about being out. I believe whiskey and spirits in general are facilitators for conversation. I believe that they're present at moments in our lives that often mean something significant. And I was amazed and impressed that, like, when people are experiencing those things, I am there in spirit because they're drinking something that I created. So, and hearing those stories and starting the discussion, starting the conversation. And that's where the name True Story came about. And you know how many times people say, "Hey, true story," or finish an anecdote and say, "Yep, that's a true story." And it all just came together in a very beautiful way. And you'll see that in our marketing. You'll see that in how we develop the brand. And, we're turning the conversation around. What I'm saying to people is a lot of times is like, our story now, we want to hear yours. We're going to slide in here. We're going to slide a bottle into the party, into the event or whatever, metaphorically. And now you take it from there.
Let's talk about the bottle. It's all black.
The bourbon is all black with white lettering on the front. It's very basic, yet I say basic, very simplistic, but yet modern. And I think there's just something just fun about it. It's got this beautiful embossed raised lettering on the front. So the bourbon is a black bottle with white lettering. The rye, I thought, well, crap, why don't we just flip flop? So the rye is a white bottle with black lettering on the top or on the front, raised embossed lettering on the front. It's impossible to miss it on the shelf. It really is. And when we put it up in retail stores and put it on bars, and it points you right to those places. And some of the inspiration for that is there are other spirits that have bottles that are not clear. There are tequilas, there are rums, there are scotches, there are others, but bourbon's never really done that before. So I thought, well, why not? If we're going to go all in, let's go all in and let's create something that nobody's ever really seen before. And that was the inspiration. And one other thing on that real quick is that when I started getting nervous about it, that it was too different, that was the validation I needed that I was on the right track. And we just kept, if I wasn't on the edge I was on the edge about the Angel's Envy bottle when we first came out with it because it was so different. And and the same reasons I was scared of it ended up being the same reasons I embraced it. And that's the same with the True Story bottle. Once I embraced the uniqueness of it, and we were all in.
I posted a photo of an Angel's Envy bottle a couple of weeks ago on social media after they sent me a bottle of their newest release. And somebody pointed out that it still says from the cellars of Lincoln Henderson on the Angel's Envy bottle. Is that fair to say still for them?
Oh, wow. I don't know if I want to wade into that or not. They're certainly entitled to say that. Dad passed away a number of years ago. I think it's more metaphorical than it is, actuality. We didn't have a distillery when Dad was alive. So, even from the very beginning. So Dad never actually distilled any of the distillate that we worked with. So I think as long as everybody's transparent and everybody knows that story, that it's okay for them to do that. I'm good with that. Angel's Envy is still my brand. It's still my baby. We may not own it anymore, but we created it. It's in our DNA, and it'll always be that way. And even with this new project, this is the next chapter for our family. True story is the next chapter. We've turned the page, but that doesn't mean the rest of the book is you throw away the rest of it. It's still there. It's part of your journey.
Thanks to Wes Henderson for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Oban, a deliciously smooth single malt known for its coastal charm and Highland heritage, loved by whiskey lovers worldwide. Discover Oban's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with Wes Henderson's new True Story whiskeys. The True Story finished bourbon is, as we mentioned, finished in white muscatel casks and bottled at 45% ABV. The nose has touches of white grapes, ginger, dried flowers, and is very aromatic and light. The taste has notes of caramel, white pepper, green grapes, ginger snap cookies, kiwi fruit, and citrus. The finish is long with citrus fruits and just a hint of spice. I'm scoring the True Story finished bourbon a 91. On the other hand, the True Story finished rye is finished in Amburana oak from Brazil and sherry casks. It's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has touches of black cherries, campfire smoke, honey, and red apples. The taste has classic rye spices balanced by caramel, black cherries, apple pie, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long with lingering spices, and I'm scoring the True Story finished rye a 93. Next up, the King of Kentucky bourbon from Brown-Forman that I mentioned during the news. It's bottled at 65.2% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, oak tannins, dry spices, molasses, vanilla, and dried fruits. The taste has spicy notes of cinnamon, chili powder, and black pepper that fade to reveal dark chocolate, oak tannins, a hint of coconut, and vanilla. Adding a few drops of water opens up dark chocolate on the nose and tempers the spices on the palate. The finish is long and dry with lingering spices. It's an excellent bourbon, and I'm scoring the King of Kentucky 2024 edition a 94. Finally, I got to taste the Dalmore 2006 vintage recently. It's bottled at 47.2% ABV. The nose is malty with touches of lemon custard, honey, and vanilla. The taste is peppery and malty with white pepper, barley sugar, dried flowers, honey, and vanilla. The finish, long and tart with a lingering touch of white pepper. I'm scoring the Dalmore 2006 vintage a 93. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 3,800 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. The eye-popping prices of some of the whiskeys I mentioned during the news had some of the folks in the WhiskyCast community talking this week, especially the Dalmore's 35,000-pound 3-bottle set. The Tracer Bullet said, "My wallet is a little light. Mark, you want to help me out here?" with a winking emoji and a laughing with tears emoji. Juan Cruz responded, "Maybe do some crowdfunding?" Mr. Pye added, "I assume that includes the presentation stand." And the Tracer Bullet responded with, "It better. Should also include delivery by Richard Patterson, too." And Christopher Glenn won the conversation with this. "Just imagine buying the set just for Richard to toss the first pour over his shoulder." Someone commented on X a couple of weeks ago that he was impressed that I could report on whiskey prices with a straight face. I don't set the prices, gang. I just report on them. I shared my tasting notes for the new Angel's Envy Triple Oak a couple of weeks ago, and David Prophet responded on X with this. "My son brought a bottle to Nashville this weekend as a gift. I found it very pleasant, a sweet and fruity, almost buttery taste on the palate. It wasn't overly woodsy in character. It has to be one of Angel's Envy's best to date." Thanks for the comment, David. And thanks to everyone who participated in the WhiskyCast community app this week. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on X, Threads, Facebook, and Instagram at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
That's the sound of our whiskey growing on Dunbell Farm, County Kilkenny. We know where every grain comes from. Only Irish barley, one farm, one terroir at a time. Waterford whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Last month, we reported on Edrington's sale of the famous Grouse blended Scotch brand to William Grant & Sons. Pete at Whiskey Ranked asked this question in the WhiskyCast community app. How does it work when a blend is sold? Will the components of famous Grouse change to William Grant & Sons produced whiskies, or will they still contract with the current producers? It's not as simple as that. Keep in mind that almost all blended Scotch brands include whiskies from many different companies that are sold and traded between each other. William Grant & Sons would inherit the recipes for the various famous Grouse expressions, but that does not mean they would automatically switch components of the blend to their in-house distilleries at Glenfiddich, the Balvenie, and Girvan. Master blender Brian Kinsman and his team will take those recipes and try to replicate them as closely as possible using whatever stocks of whiskey might come with the sale, since Edrington is getting out of the blended Scotch business with this deal. In the end, the formula will probably change slightly depending on what malt whiskeys Grant's has in its inventory, and the grain whiskey components would likely switch to Girvan-produced whiskey. Pete, it's an interesting question, and after the sale closes, I'll try to see if we can get Brian Kinsman on the show to explain the transition. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, and a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from your app store. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
The 2024 release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is out now, available at Dewars.com. Get it while you can and appreciate every double-aged rye cask finished dram. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.